hip hop, hip hop, hip hop, hip
Bars is back.
hip hop,
Sam
hip
Ant.
hop,
Oh God.
hop,
What's
hip
up with you?
hop.
I done watched them niggas do interview after interview. They not culture vultures. The culture something they been into. So if you never gave.
All right, I explained to people when they asked me about like Democratic politics versus Republican politics now, right? Because you want to hear every troll who didn't have a voice before social media come on and say the Democrats started the KKK. Like that's a point. You're right, they did, and a lot of people were racist back then, including plenty of Republicans. But what's interesting is that the Republican Party used to be the home of black people during the 1800s at that particular time. What we have now is we're living in the kind of the sunset of freedom because we are a victim of the 9/11 effect. And what the 9/11 effect is for everyone who's listening is before 9/11, we had a gauge of the Democratic Party not really representing the left, but they represented some semblance of that. The right wing was just the right wing, and a party of business that masqueraded as a party of the Constitution and civil rights. But the reality is this, that during this shift, right after 9/11, when all politics shifted to the right, those people who were supposedly right-wingers, they got shifted to the center. Then the far-right people, the freak shows you never used to hear about, that all of a sudden will come out and have a voice for whatever reason, they became actually legitimized. And the far left became something that we never actually talk about. But it's interesting because Donald Trump did not run against Hillary Clinton with a bunch of Republican talking points. If you go back to the 2016 election, he ran against Hillary Clinton with left-wing talking points from the Green Party, from the far left of the far left of the Democratic Party, which is just the real left. It's just been co-opted by those people. See, I think when you talk about these kind of politics, it's not that people are angry at healthcare, right? No one's angry at free healthcare. Oh my God, free healthcare. That's going to turn us into communist China. No, what people are angry at is authoritarianism. But if you read history, you don't need to have communism to have authoritarianism. You know, there was communism during the 1776, and it was terror. It was terror. It was authoritarianism to every person that was my color and lighter and darker. So when we're talking about oppression and whether someone needs to be conscientious of being used by a particular political party, absolutely, I feel like they should be, and I feel like people should be consequential of that. But don't look at the bait and switch. You know what I mean? For example, don't let the Democrats tell you that they're going to stand for you, and then as soon as the election's over, the spirit of the Black Panther now gets stripped away. We're not playing that, right? Or don't let Republicans tell you, oh, Donald Trump did so much because he let a few people out of prison, which I'm very glad. I'm glad those people out. Shout out to them if they're watching. But he also appointed a lot of racist judges and people that pushed heavy sentences in federal crimes. So he's also pulling a bait and switch and putting people back in jail. So the people that I hear argue for him are like fake smart people. It's like you're a fool. You sound like those fools that think that Obama was a progressive. He wasn't. He was a center-right person that completed the Bush Doctrine. So when we talk about the Bush Doctrine, we remember that lady who ran with John McCain, Sarah Palin. Everybody was laughing at her. They said she was an idiot, which she probably was. But they asked her about the Bush Doctrine, and she didn't know what it was. Now, just for the kids out there who want to learn, the Bush Doctrine was the practice of going to other countries that did not have America's hegemonic interests in mind and toppling them and putting a friendly government in there. So when Bush left, right, you had Obama come into power, and it wasn't like governments stopped toppling. There was Iraq, Afghanistan during that time. Okay, cool. But now we got Libya, which turns into a slave market, Syria. We poked the Russian bear in the Ukraine, and the Crimea had to be retaken because it's the home site of over 1,000 nuclear warheads, and they can't have that fall into the hands of an unfriendly government. It would be like if Russia fomented the overthrow of Mexico or Canada. We would have a real problem with them, and we would fuck with them until the end. So when people say, hey, the Russians are interfering, well, of course they're interfering. If they could, they would. If we could interfere in their elections, we would if they had an election, but they don't. So every time we have an election, we try to interfere too because everybody has an agenda. What's your agenda? That's my question. right?
Now, how far did it go? Because I was seeing some stuff like the the Russians were like manipulating and spearheading this whole indigenous movement. Did you hear anything about that?
No, I mean, listen. The Russians have their role in what they've dealt with in terms of the Cold War for the United States. But the reality is that they were fighting on the back foot during the Obama administration. He definitely had them on the defensive. They had to commit real troops to Syria, whereas Obama was more of the type to fight with mercenaries. People call them contractors, but they're not there to fix your roof. That's who was sent to Syria, a lot of mercenary groups and people that honestly were friendly to Al Qaeda. That's who we were sent. And which is, I think, something else that we have to recognize, that the biggest purveyor or one of the biggest purveyors of radical Islamic terrorism is the United States of America. It foments that. It encourages that when it invades other countries to create a situation that is untenable for that society to live in. The same way that the British used to do that when they would leave a country. They would say, okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to leave India, but we want to make this place so fucked up that it'll look like we were organized. So what we'll do is we'll cut the country like this. We'll put Pakistan here with mad Muslim people. Then we'll put Hindus here. And on the other side of the Hindus, we'll put a small little country, which is now, Bangladesh, but it was East Pakistan. So they know how to set up like the ultimate leaving bricks out so protesters will throw it. They know what to do to try and trigger people and elicit the response that they're looking for.
What do you think the outcome is going to be with these police officers in the George Floyd case out in Minneapolis? Now, obviously, we've had the protests, we've had the riots. They're in jail. I know some of them got put out on bond, but we got a trial that we still got to look forward to. And we've seen the percentages of how many of these police officers get off and get off fairly easy. This is a little bit of a different circumstance because now the world is watching, and I don't know if the patience is as high as it was back in the day in these other previous murders. What do you think is going to happen? And what do you think the complexion of the world will look like once we see a verdict handed down?
I think it'll go federal. I think they'll get charged with something, manslaughter at the least, murder at the most. But you're right. I think there is a point here to be made about people being fed up and not wanting to stop the protests. And I say that because the protests and because the coronavirus exposed something about everything in our society. Like, I'm in Harlem, and my dad always told me that when Columbia University advertises to white kids from the Middle West, they say that they're in Upper Manhattan. When they ask for federal funds, they say that they're in Harlem, right? So there's almost 20,000 people that are not coming back to Ivy League schools like that this year. And when people ask why, it's because the parents called the school and asked them, well, what's the curriculum going to look like? And they're like, oh, we're going to have Zoom classes. And they're like, I'm not paying $80,000 a year. You can't charge me the same amount and do what we're doing right now. Like, really? Get the fuck out of here. Like, nah, for that, I can send them to another school, which is close by. But what it exposed is that they could have been doing that this whole time, brother. They could have been giving everybody a Harvard education. They could have been giving everybody Zoom classes from Columbia University and making sure people were intelligent. But the problem is that we're not just dealing with racism. We're dealing with racism that is structured by capitalism, right? So capitalism doesn't want you to sit there and everybody succeed. No, capitalism requires a permanent underclass when you have kind of laissez-faire economics coupled with it. You know, that's what ends up being the result. So when people look at this and they say, oh, well, I'm making $30,000 a year, I'm working class, and someone's making $300,000 a year, and they say, well, I'm middle class. Well, no, you're both a wage slave. One of you just has like a nicer place. That's it. But the thing that communists and capitalists agree on, you know, for every woke and fake woke person watching this, you know, what capitalists and communists agree on is that controlling the means of production, controlling resources, that's what determines class, not how much money the slave master is willing to give you for that. Because right now I know people who had a $300,000 job, $300,000 a year job, brother, and now they ain't making no money. And their $600,000 house, that note got to be paid. The car note got to be paid. You worth negative $800,000, and you might be a doctor, but what the fuck does that matter when you live in a box? Like this is what we're dealing with out here. It's not that the American economy crumbled like a house of cards. It's crumbling like a house of cards because it was a house of cards. It's a Ponzi scheme. And for many people, they're recognizing that now. Were there any consequences for those Republican senators who were caught with insider trading for millions of dollars when the coronavirus hit and they decided to divest from the companies that would be harder hit? No, because that's what you're dealing with. So when people don't see consequences for those individuals, they think to themselves, well, how can you expect us to have consequences for that? There are idiots out there who used to be mad at graffiti. Now they pray motherfuckers just want to spray paint the wall instead of break the fucking wall down and rip your ass the fuck out your house.